There was some great sense of a door opening into an understanding of life that I had been waiting to come to.
I know life is going from good to better. And that is the most uplifting thought. I love it and I live with it every day.
It has influenced every area of my life, and it's uplifted me and given me an understanding of who I am and what God is and what the purpose of life is. We living in this little apartment, and he would throw his stuff on the floor, and I would have to always pick it up, and I was getting, it's getting to be a bit much. And Dr. Horace said to me, "You have to be grateful that you have this sufficiency, and he doesn't. Be grateful." It was just, everything was gratefulness. And I felt that opened up a door to me, and that being grateful opened up the spiritual door.
It's not organized, it's not a religion. It is, you don't have to be a member. There's no in or out group. It's the ideas. By their fruits shall ye know them. If someone understands these ideas, their lives are blessed to the degree that they understand them. And we all get on to the ideas and apply them in our lives, but there are no rules. There are no shoulds. His focus really was not religion or metaphysics. He wanted to make a contribution to psychiatry. And one of his little booklets is called God in Psychiatry. And he quoted from some Old Testament prophet about the valley of the dry bones. And he wanted to breathe life into the dry bones of the psychiatric world as he saw it.
Dr. Hora was a psychoanalyst who had discovered that analysis and psychology didn't work.
His interest was that of a psychologist and a clinician, and he wanted to explore what is it that keeps us from realizing the truth, which so many is stated everywhere in all different religions and philosophies over the millennia. There's been some pretty clear idea about universal spiritual truth, but we seem not to get it.
He traveled mentally and thoughtfully through all the great religions of the world, through the great thinkers, through all the great literature, and ended up in the New Testament. And not as a place to worship, but as a way of being in the world.
As Dr. Horowitz would say, there are many ways to the truth. And if your life is not more joyous, more happifying, go find something else. Don't waste my time and yours.
Most of us don't know what our purpose in life is. What are we here for?
Who has the better life, the first violinist or the second violinist?
It's very simple, but it's very important. In metapsychiatry, we say that the purpose of life is to come to know reality.
And we went around the group, everybody was making suggestions and ideas, talking about this and that, money, prestige, a sense of enjoyment, anything we could think of, until Dr. Hora came out with the answer that had us all taken aback and embarrassed that we didn't think of it. His answer was, whoever loves the most.
And there's nothing out there that's going to make us happy. It's all within. It's all the understanding of ourselves, of who we are, what we are, what's the meaning of our lives.
It isn't so much what we do that matters in life, but how much love we bring to it.
It's not to get rich, it's not to, be fashionable, it's not to be whatever. Everybody thinks, we can express it in different ways. But to come to know reality, that's what we're here to do.
So metapsychiatry comes and says, you can develop sufficient understanding of reality and of your self-identity so that you can become immune to these universal tendencies to suffering.
I hurt my ribs and I was lying in bed, and one of my friends, I said, gee, I don't think I'm getting anywhere with this therapist for 2 years, and I'm worse now than I ever was. I didn't even feel sick when I went. So she said she went to a panel discussion, and she saw this doctor, Dr. Hora, and he seemed different than the others. You might want to try him.
Psychiatry and psychology study what's wrong with man. And metapsychiatry is a study of existence, existential metapsychiatry, but it is looking at man as everything right and everything good.
And what was happening in the therapist was that why I was suffering so was that I was saying to him, I feel this way with that, I feel this way. And he never was ever able to help me get away from the feelings. And I kind of waited to see, why don't those feelings change? And as I was waiting for the feelings to change, not knowing that I can do anything about it. And here I'm going for 2 to 3 years to this guy, and I'm getting worse and worse.
Having had 5.5 years of psychological therapy with its focus on feelings and the reality and the importance of feelings and crying all the time, shortly into the session I began to cry over something, and Dr. Hora said, now you are being dramatic. And I was devastated. It's so interesting to me. I felt like I'd been hit with a 2x4. And as I thought about it later, much later, I realized there was absolutely nothing personal, critical, or judgmental in his comment, but he nailed what I was doing.
And I'm talking the same way to Dr. Hora as I'm talking to the therapist downstairs. I said, I can't tell you how I feel. I feel this way about this thing, and I'm feeling it. And he says, do you want to change your feelings? I said, what? I'm able to change my feelings? He says, Yes, change your thoughts. I said, say that again. He says, change your thoughts and you'll change your feelings. Let me tell you, one session, I didn't have to go back. That's how great it was. And I think about it now, I tremble. I tremble from the whole story.
That was his kind of therapy, which was clarifying the idea, the beliefs and the thoughts behind our behavior, what he called our mode of being in the world, the way we think and think we have to be as persons. He would just clarify the ideas, and learning to allow those, essentially what he called ignorant or personal beliefs about things, to be clarified, and not taking that personally, not trying to defend it, was one of the major lessons, I think, for all of us who worked with Dr. Hora.
I come from a culture where, you know, you got to have your balance sheets strong, and, you know, your husband's got to have a great career. You have to have a good career or be doing something important. And the reality is I'm blissfully in love with an artist. And I'm currently not working and don't really know what is the right path for me career-wise. And it's okay.
If we're honest, when we find ourselves distressed about things, we can always find that we believe something should be or shouldn't be, or that we want something or we don't want it.
I have been dating my boyfriend for 2.5 years, and we lived together for that whole time, and I truly loved him, and you know, I kept saying to Ruth, but when is he going to marry me? When? I mean, what is wrong? What's going on? I need the ring. I want to be married. And she was really wonderful in that that's not, you're not here to get what you want. Getting what you want isn't always the right idea. And you're looking for this interactive symbol that isn't going to work. And the more I pushed him, the more he sort of stepped away. So it was really interesting for, I mean, she's so great to me. She's like, whoa, 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 gotta stop that. You know, and she just said, you know, when you're with him, how do you feel? And I said, I love him. I love being with him. I'm joyful. I'm happy. I laugh. And she said, well, you know, what's the problem?
It's the friction. It's the rowing, trying to row upstream that's the most difficult part. And that's when you think you know and you've got it all figured out and you know how to do it. I know how to climb this mountain. The bad weather won't come. I'm going to get to the top. I'm going to do this and that. It doesn't work.
Normally we think of ourselves as a self-existent person with a mind of our own and a will of our own, power of our own, here all alone, and that we have to do everything ourselves. But enlightened teachings, such as metapsychiatry, reveal to us another answer, which is that we're divine consciousnesses.
What the world values is self-promotion. Is I did it myself. I'm either beautiful or handsome or rich or wise, witty, and I did it all by myself. Whereas the enlightened being understands that all the credit comes from God. That whatever good ideas they've had, whatever they've been able to express that's been beneficial in their lives, came to them as a gift from divine mind.
We know that God is infinite mind, but certainly God is not infinite evil. And taking everyone and design for him a special kind of affliction, right? So I think this is a misunderstanding of the biblical messages. And it's very well possible that this has been always misunderstood in the religions. Now, as you know, we keep claiming that metapsychiatry is not a religion. And certainly in this particular situation, we have a better answer. God, who is infinite love and intelligence, couldn't possibly be the designer of our problems.
First of all, when I went to him, I didn't believe in God at all. And then when he started to use that, I said, I don't believe in God. He said, I don't want you to believe in God. I want you to understand. I said, you can call it whatever you like. It doesn't have to be God. It can be intelligence, love intelligence, things like that. And it kind of put me in another frame of thinking. Love intelligence, you can think about that there's a love intelligent universe, and that any question or anything, the answer is in there, is in that, wherever it is, in that sphere. And you just have to have the interest and the key to open up that door.
While God is a beautiful word and much appreciated, it is really essentially a religious word. But God belongs to everyone, whether you're religious or not.
The wonderful thing I think about metapsychiatry is that you could be Catholic, you could be Jewish, you could be Baptist, you could be Buddhist, you could be an atheist. And you can stay those things and still grow and grow spiritually. It's non-denominational.
When I went to the synagogue and I read what was there, I said, this is what Dr. Horror was talking about. I don't know whether I would have interpreted it that way if I wouldn't have known.
I appreciate that there are many other words we can use for God that shed light on what we're trying to understand. And one of the ones that I appreciate the most is omniactive love intelligence.
Omniaction means being aware of the now, being aware of the divine presence at all times with us.
Dr. Horror was able to explicate that so that when you thought of God, you didn't think of a man in the sky, but you thought of an all-embracing love, an intelligent love.
If we would only let go more and let God, we would be led to so many delightful, marvelous surprises that our little limited minds could never fathom. And so why not open up to this infinite, glorious intelligence of one mind?
We live in God. I studied a lot of nature, and I used to think that God lived in nature. But actually, nature lives in God.
My parents were in a car crash, and I got a phone call, and I went to the hospital, and they said, your mom won't make it through the night, and we don't know about your dad. And it was, it sort of everything stops right then. And this was probably midnight, and they were still in the OR, and we couldn't see them until maybe 4 or 5 in the morning. So we had sort of this 4-hour period of time of just really of quiet and really not knowing, just being very confused. And so I remember driving from Greenwich to Boston, where the hospital was, and praying the whole time, just because I knew my mother was worse off, just saying, please God save my mom, please God save my mom. That's all I wanted, please God save my mom.
When something happens, to be able to respond to it moment by moment, that's hearing God. That's knowing that whatever you say, whatever you do, it's going to work out. It's the right thing.
You know, we're sitting in the hospital and I was sort of absorbing more information that she had had a very significant brain injury. And so by the time I got to see her, which was probably about 4 a.m. in the ICU, I saw my dad. They were in ICU rooms right next to each other, and I saw my dad first, and he looked better to me. So I went in and saw my mom, and my mom was not, was significantly injured and was not going to be all right. And so I had this experience of just total quiet and thinking, God, please take my mom. And it was really different. It was just totally different from what I had been thinking the last 6 hours. And it was just sort of this voice. It wasn't rational or reason. It was just, I was seeing my mom, and this was not, this was not a, she was very, very damaged. The only thing I could recognize were these 3 fingers. And so just this feeling came out of, God, please take my mom, because that's right. And I had never had that experience before of being quiet and having not a message or a voice, but knowing something was really right. And so Susan Fisher is my closest confidant, so I came home and I was talking about the experience. She said, 1, you cannot do this alone, and 2, you got to go talk to Ruth. Because I know it's happening to you, and there's language about it, and you can understand it.
Psychology was like trying to study a leaf that had fallen from a tree and was either dried out or not dried out, and trying to understand man like you try to understand a leaf without even knowing about the tree. How could you make sense of what a leaf is unless you understood that it comes from a tree? And that was his analogy for trying to study man and man's consciousness apart from God.
I was married to a policeman, and he would like to go to conventions and dinner and dance parties and so forth. And he was a very good-looking guy, and I never went for confidence. I never really had too much confidence in myself as a female. And so I would go to these affairs, and I'd sit at a table. I didn't know a soul, and he would be prancing around, going from table to table. He had a tremendous personality. And I would sit there like I'm never going back to this place. And what am I doing here? Stuff like that. So I said to Ralphie, the next time you go, don't count me in. And Puss, he says, come on, I'd love to have you there. I said, I'm there all by myself. I said, everybody else has a partner there. So I bring it to Dr. Hora. And he says, I tell him the story. I'm sitting there and I feel isolated. Nobody's talking to me. I can't bring up a conversation. And he says, have you ever walked through a garden? I said, of course I've walked through a garden. He says, do you see the beautiful flowers? I says, yes. He says, do the flowers pay attention to you? So I said, no, they don't. He says, well, what do you think about the flowers? I says, they're beautiful, and I'm so grateful that I can be there and see them. He says, well, so are these people. They're flowers. And you appreciate them, and you see their beauty. Every time I talk about this guy, I want to cry. So I said, okay. I said, I never thought of it like that. So I went to another convention, another party, and go with that idea. It was fabulous. Not only that, but my husband came over to me, said, Puss, I want to take you around to meet the people, my friends. It's the first time. So the whole thing changed, just with a change of thinking.
And this is where metapsychiatry is so clear that everything is a thought, that we live, in fact, in a mental universe, that's what's primary, not the phenomenal world, not the material world, but what's going on in our individual consciousness.
Waiting to receive divinely inspired thoughts is one of the most wonderful things in life, whether it's in business, whether it's in marriage, whether it's in raising children. It's knowing that you don't have to react. You can respond with a loving idea. But the loving idea is a universal idea. It's not a personal idea. And that's just incredible. It's hard to remember. It's hard to wait. It's hard to listen. Too often we want to react. But boy, is it worth it if you can just listen. It is just incredible.
Theologians needed to see that God is consciousness with a capital C. And psychologists needed to see that consciousness ultimately is God, is a universal, non-dimensional awareness.
Who then designs of our problems? Ignorance. Ignorance is the designer of our problem, and every individual has a choice of being ignorant in his own particular way. And there's a great freedom in choosing our affliction.
Problem is a blessing because it's like getting the hook on stage when you're not doing a good job. It just lets you know. If you listen, it lets you know this ain't right.
The problem is designed to bring us closer to God. It's designed to help us learn how to live. It's designed to show us what it means to be enlightened.
There was a little boy who was a real bully, who had a lot of difficulty with it, and he was terrorizing his parents. He was 5. And I was really concerned about him because he just enjoyed being mean. So I only had him for 1 year, but we worked very hard at understanding the difference between good ideas and ideas that didn't work so well. And eventually I made 2 little signs, one that said peaceful and the other that said bully. I had wished that they'd be more grammatically compatible, and every now and then I would drop one of them in front of him as I observed his behavior, making sure to do it evenly.
There are 2 fundamental questions which are they are the basic diving board for healing in metapsychiatry. What is the meaning of what seems to be? And what really is? So he taught us not to just go with the way things seem to be to us, but to stand back and to ask, what's the meaning? What's the meaning of this problem, this feeling, this illness, this disturbance, this situation? And the meaning was really asking, what beliefs am I holding? How do I think life works? Who do I think I am?
Eventually, what were you thinking when you hit Josie or took her pencil or were mean to her on the playground? What thought did you have? The child would say, well, I don't know. And I would say, well, we need to know. We need to know those ideas that are behind what we do.
For example, if you're angry, then what is anger? We would ask. What is the meaning of this experience? What is that anger? And anger is a thought, but it's a very specific thought. It's an emotional reaction to not getting what we want.
So I worked with this little boy to get to the point where he could identify the idea. What was the idea that was manifesting in his behavior, which of course is what is the meaning of what seems to be. And in the springtime, sometime around the end of May, he brought me the little sign that said bully and said, I think we can rip this up now. Isn't that fabulous? And I've seen him around school, and he's a happy child.
I used to have horrible nightmares after Mom died, just of the car. I saw the car that my parents had been in, and then I had the police report. I just had too much information, and so I'd have these horrible nightmares, sort of recreating it, or how my mother looked after the accident. And Ruth would say, well, these are images and ideas that are coming up to be healed. So you can't repress them. They're going to come up to be healed, and that's actually a blessing. So that was a new idea to me as well, that, nightmares or upsetting thoughts are a blessing, but they're being delivered to be healed, to be released.
I think the most important story for me in my life has been the death of my husband. So 9/11 happened, and I was a teacher, and I was pulled out of class into the headmaster's office, and slowly but surely, as he spoke, and it began to dawn on me what was happening, and some people, some very close friends, all showed up. They had no business being there. And at one point, everybody was out of the office, and I was there, and the radio was on, and I heard the announcer talk about the Pentagon had just been hit. And that was really the first realization that people have been saying, well, maybe it was a mistake or something. And then I realized that something big was happening. And at that moment, I just kind of shut down. I shut down my humanity. I mean, I shut down my humanness, and turned straight to the good of God, and just got very, very quiet inside, and called my daughter, who said on the other end of the phone, oh, Mom! I said, Louise, are you watching television? And she said, yes, she was. I said, well, turn off the television, because wherever Dad is, whether he's dead or alive, he's in the middle of a big transition. And he needs all the loving thoughts that we can give him. Sorry. So I called my son Jamie, and we had essentially the same conversation, that we really needed to behold Dad, and that's a term that comes up in metapsychiatry, but that we needed to behold Ben as surrounded by wisdom and love and intelligence for wherever he was. That he needed the best ideas that God could provide. So then I left the school. I dismissed the kids and left the school. And as I was leaving the school, people were saying, oh, and there were all these temptations to move away from this stance, but this quietness and this solidarity within me, this just complete reliance on the good of God, without having to know very much. That's what was my job at that point, to do the best thing I could do for my husband. So I drove all the way home and never turned on the radio. It was about a half-hour drive. And when I got here, there were people in the house already, and the television was on, and I never looked at the television. I just was extremely quiet and did what I had to do. I'd made a few phone calls, but I never looked at the television. And just held him in that quiet place. And of course, that was wonderful. And I think the peace that was established in my soul, consciousness, around that event carried me through the rest of the time. And I still feel that. And the loveliest thing was that when there was a bombing in London, you know, the subway was bombed and the bus was bombed, my daughter, Louisa, called me up and she said, "Mom, I'm holding all those people, the ones who have died and the ones who are left, in prayer, just the way we did with Dad." I thought that was so fabulous.
One lesson that made a lot of sense to me was I'm not here to get what I want. And in my first 27 years, I didn't know that. I thought that was the whole point. And so that made a lot of sense to me. I didn't want to lose my mom at such a young age. I didn't want my dad to be in so much pain. He was significantly injured also in the car accident. But that wasn't what I was here for.
All problems are psychological, and all solutions are spiritual. Well, we don't like to hear that at first because it sounds like we're to blame. But he's not saying that at all. He's saying that we live in a mental universe, a spiritually mental universe, and everything has a meaning.
I had fibroid tumors, physical condition. And when I went to see a medical doctor, they told me I need to have surgery. So we had friends of ours who was a surgeon, a GYN, very good friends. And he says, "Michelle, you have a very large tumor, size of a grapefruit, and another one with the size of a lemon, another you got your fruit." He says, "You have to have surgery, and don't worry about the price. I do it for nothing. I know Ralph so well, blah, 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 blah." So I said, hold off. I said, "I got to see my psychiatrist." "What are you talking about? What is your psychiatrist going to do?" I got to see my psychiatrist. My psychiatrist says, the body is the shadow of the mind. I got to see him. He says, "Well, hurry it up, because I can cut out the tumors, but if you stay too long, you'll have to have a hysterectomy."
Problems show us, bring up to our attention beliefs about life and ourselves that are dysfunctional. Life itself is not suffering and it isn't dysfunctional. So if we're in an area of dysfunction, it's pointing us. There's something about life that we just haven't seen yet.
So I went to see Dr. Hora, and we had a discussion, and it had to do with gender and things like that, not going into specifically. And I gave up the thought. I always thought I'd be shortchanged because I'm a female, would go to a restaurant, I'd see somebody else get a bigger dish than me because he's a male. I was a female, I got a smaller dish, and it was there. I wanted to be a tomboy, I didn't want to be a girl, so everything was working. I come back about a month later, it shrunk. He says, "Oh." I said, "See?" He said, No. He says, "I want to see you in 3 months." Come back in 3 months, it shrunk more. Come back later on, and it disappeared. It just disappeared. I never had the surgery.
A Sunday afternoon, literally, I got to the point where I must say I was literally contemplating suicide. The pain was so absolute and intense. I had been to doctors, I'd done everything, and it was literally just absolutely driving me insane. And I was finally so suffering that I was willing to be embarrassed enough and called Dr. Hora. And unbelievably, I said, Dr. Hora, and he hadn't talked to me in a year and a half, and he goes, yes, Paul. And I described the pain, and I said, I really need your help. And he says, well, this is very simple. He said, it can go away instantly. And of course, I'm not, he said, you are having, he said, have you been on the telephone? He said, what ear is it in? And I said, it's in my left ear. He says, when you speak on the telephone, do you have your left ear to the receiver? And I said, yes. He said, there's someone that you've been on the telephone with quite frequently, most recently, and he said, you are having some very angry, hateful thoughts that you have suppressed that are manifesting themselves in this pain. And he said, what you must do is go to a quiet place, be willing to be embarrassed, and bring up these thoughts and forgive yourself. And the pain will go away.
Life is not just chaotic, that there is a meaning to the experience. For instance, a year or so ago, I remember after coming back from a trip from the West Coast, seeing my son and his family out there, having this pain in my shoulder.
The meaning, as Dr. Hora described, the mental equivalent of an experience. The experience can be a perception, it can be an interaction with somebody, it can be a physical occurrence in the body, and it's saying that this experience is expressing some deeply cherished thoughts and values that need to be examined, that need to be exposed, that need to be evaluated because they are troublesome.
And I realized that that I had a chip on my shoulder. I was angry with these children, wanting, to be acknowledged, wanting attention, wanting respect, and all these wanting ideas get you into trouble.
And so what we're doing in metapsychiatry, in practicing these two intelligent questions, what is the meaning of what seems to be, and what is what really is to transmute or to bring the problem or the condition or the symptom or the feeling back to its thought.
I find that once you understand the meaning of the experience, and then you turn your attention to what really is, and what is that we're individual, as Hora calls us, individual units of awareness. We're here for God. They're not here for me. And so I find that a healing.
And the pain was so intense, I went into a room, shut the door, laid down on a bed, and it started coming to me. Because it wasn't even in my consciousness of who the person was and what the thoughts were and what the anger was. And at the moment I sincerely forgave myself, there was a rush in my head. It was like if you poured the peroxide in your ear, it started bubbling and gurgling. I mean, it was making incredible noise. And I couldn't believe it. And I turned on my left side, and literally it exploded, and like a pint of liquid came out of my ear. So I thought. It felt like an explosion. I could feel the liquid actually come out of my ear on the pillow, and the pain was gone. And this is after 2.5 days of pain. And I looked at the pillow, there was nothing there.
All of our issues and problems, all of the phenomena of our lives are meaningful. We can understand what happens to us, why it's happening, so to speak. And not only can we understand that, but we can from that point open our thought to a truth, an ultimate truth that will heal and restore and help and grow us.
I think it was at that point where I truly understood that pain is an angry thought.
PEGAL is an acronym for peace, assurance, gratitude, and love. And Dr. Hora described it as a principle of perfect life. And that when we are living in harmony with perfect life, then we will live a life of PEGAL, of peace and assurance, gratitude and love. And everything will work together for good.
What it really is a clear definition of what enlightenment is. It's a clear definition of a pure consciousness is.
When I had been in the middle of a huge crisis in my life, and I was in a state of acute anxiety and great fear and a deep depression, and I really didn't know how to solve the problems that I was facing in my life. My whole life had just broken apart, so to speak. My marriage had ended, the house had been sold, I had 2 children to care for, I had no idea where I was going to go, I had no money. It was really the most desperate moment of my life. And I prayed to God, finally in desperation. And what happened was that I became enveloped in this sense of peace. And then assurance followed it. And I was so grateful, and I realized I was loved.
You know, you could read about consciousness forever and maybe or maybe not really get it. But to see and understand PEGAL, or to have PEGAL present, you just have to have it present once for just a little moment, just that little glimpse, just that little peek under the curtain of what's really going on. And then you're pretty much drawn to it, and you know it's there. And it really is it's a wonderful place to be.
All of a sudden, having been lifted up by this tremendous sense of well-being and this peace that I had never known in my life before, and assurance that I had never known in my life before, the fear was gone, the anxiety was gone, and the depression was gone. It was completely gone. Where did it go? How did it dissolve? It was a mystery, but it was clear that it was no longer there.
So many times in my life when I'm struggling with something, how to manage this, or how to think of whatever, how, and I get a clear thought from a little bit larger perspective of what's going on, there's nothing to do anymore. The arduousness is just gone. So clarity replaces arduousness, and that's the clarity of realization.
Metapsychiatry has, for lack of a better term, calmed me down incredibly, because I realize I don't need to get agitated about things, that I just need to be aware, and that the answer will come.
Whenever anything is becoming problematic, one of the first Hora-isms that I go to is gratitude is the door to joy, and immediately you shift your focus to what's good in life and what you're grateful for, and it puts whatever the supposed problem is immediately in perspective.
The inspiration is there. God is present. God is all there is. So when I'm in need, to the degree that I can be receptive and recognize that I need an idea here. At this moment, I need an idea to clarify what's true for me.
Whenever I'm stumped, I just sit back and have no idea when it'll come. But generally speaking, a lot of people, there's old sayings like, why don't you sleep on it, that type of thing. What that really means, I believe, is giving God a chance to speak, giving divine mind a chance to present an idea that comes to you. And I think most people receive those ideas. I'm just not so sure we all know where they come from.
And so when that cash register line is too long at the supermarket, and I'm impatient, and I'm afraid that I won't make it to the appointment, that particular principle absolutely heals the moment, and I'm able to be present in that moment and enjoy the capability of the cashier or the loving dialogue that she might be having with the person in front of me that's taking so much time, but that's what that individual might have needed. And I see that. It's just the whole world shifts.
I think that having learned these things from Dr. Hora certainly made me a different person. That you find joy in many things, and you don't have to worry so much.
It was like being lifted up an entire level of consciousness, and it's as if I had been living blind, and now I saw. That amazing grace. I once was blind, but now I see. That was my experience.
I think one of the most wonderful moments of metapsychiatry was writing all those, responding to the 750 letters that I got about Ben's death. I spent a summer responding to the letters that I got about Ben. And the first 20 letters, I just wrote them out and got a little patter going. And then I began to read the letter, sit quietly, and really respond to it. And through that writing and that quiet came some wisdom that I found very helpful to me of understanding what death was. I remember sitting there one day and realizing that love hadn't died, intelligence hadn't died, good companionship hadn't died, good conversation with Ben hadn't died, humor particularly hadn't died, that those qualities, those non-dimensional, non-dual spiritual qualities were still taking shape in my life. It was just a different shape. But that those were the things that I really loved about my husband. And those were the things that had, made my life rich and full. And those were continuing. I was very grateful for that.
I think about Dr. Hora saving my life. I was walked out when I knew I was going to have this interview. I said, "Oh, Dr. Hora, how you saved my life." I was like a vegetable before, I felt, hiding. All through my college I was hiding. Really, I hid because I felt everybody was better than me. Everybody was smarter than me. Everybody could talk better than me. It was strange. Brought me right out.
I had an experience where I really felt it when my dad died. And it's interesting because I sort of thought, after Mom died, what a blessing that Ruth and metapsychiatry had come into my life, because I really need it. And what a blessing that this has happened. And after my father died, I thought, I think this was invited into my life because not just to, sort of understand and move forward from my mother passing away, but then to handle losing my father so close, only less than 3 years later.
He showed us the way to live a peaceful, harmonious, creative, fulfilling life. What greater gift can you receive from anyone than that? So he gave us all the tools by which to find it.
and we're sitting there and I'm rubbing his leg and I was just saying, I love you, Dad, I love you. And I just got really quiet. And I was thinking, my brother and my fiance and I and my dad are here and we're all just jointly loving each other. And it's really amazing. And I got this feeling that my father wasn't this body that was having these seizures and doing really scary things. That he was, that he was a spirit, and he was there too in this sort of joint participation of love, and there was God, and everything was already all right, even though I didn't know it.
So metapsychiatry is really a great blessing which makes it possible for us to transcend and be liberated from this universal experience of mankind, where all forms of afflictions and sufferings come to us, but we have a right to be healed.